be chairing this meeting and the rest of them in February. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. On February the 7th, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site for human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Now, I see all my council colleagues are here this afternoon. I'm going to ask CAO Morris if he would just tell us and tell you what town staff will be joining our meeting today, please.
Yes, certainly. So we have with us this evening Director Paul McMunn, Public Works. We have Treasurer Janet Cozile, Director of Corporate Services Carrie Costello, our Senior Planner Carl Grenke, and we have our Deputy Clerk Nadine Bennett with us too.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. There's no disclosure of, is there any disclosure of monetary interest? Sorry, I should ask that question. Seeing none. There are no delegations this evening and no adoption of minutes due to the nature of our meeting. There are no CAO or director's reports either. Is that true, CAO Morris?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. There are no correspondence items and there are no in-camera issues. So we'll go ahead to our priority issues. 8.1, tax exemption for Royal Canadian Air Force, RCAF, 442 Rideau Wing, report 2020-10, and that's with Treasurer Cozile. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm here this evening seeking Council's authorization of a bylaw for property tax relief for the RCAF. This is a renewal of an existing bylaw for a 10-year period commencing in 2022. Previously, the Royal Canadian Legion was also part of this bylaw, but they have since been classified as exempt by MPAC. And the taxation that would be reversed or written off is approximately $6,900.
Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Mayor Pankow?
Yes, thank you, Janet. Safe to assume, I guess, that is an agreement with the RCAF Association and the property was ever to change hands, so that agreement would not carry forward.
So through the chair, the stipulation as per the Municipal Act, it says a memorial home, clubhouse, or athletic grounds by person who served in the armed forces. So that's the reason for the exemption. So if it was anyone other than what's classified under that section of the Municipal Act, they would not get the exemption.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, seeing thumbs up and no other comments. Thank you for that. We'll go ahead to, and this is coming forward tonight. In fact, all of our priority issues will be on our council agenda next. 8.2, priority issue 8.2 is the revised street naming Bellamy Farm Phase 2 subdivision. And that's with our senior planner, Carl Grenke. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. This staff are bringing back a revised proposed street names for Phase 2 of the Bellamy Farm subdivision. As Council will recall, direction was given at the previous meeting in December for Parkview Homes, the developer, to proceed with with street names in the subdivision based on the approved street name list. And Parkview Homes has come back with proposed, as directed by council, with preferred names for the Crescent Street and the Connection Street, as well as a couple of alternates. So we have had feedback from the public, from the fire department and police chief that Whitcomb and Williston are fairly close and can cause confusion with the dispatch. So their simple request is that if we choose one, we not choose the other. Parkview's proposal is for Curry and Williston to be chosen, so that would be that would not pose an issue from that end. Both of those names are on our policy. So if council is supportive of these names in principle, then we can then staff will undertake the formal circulation with agencies and bring forward a resolution once that circulation is complete. Thank you.
Any questions for Senior Planner Grinke? Everyone's okay with that? Great, thank you very much. And this will be coming forward at our next. Sorry, Councillor McGuire, did you have a question?
Yeah, but I think Councillor Alfred had her hand up first.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Alfred.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A few thoughts on this one. I would favor for Road 1 Whitcomb. That what name came from the Lest We Forget. And if you read the description of what Mr. Whitcomb did, I think he's well worthy of this, and it's been on the list since 2014 when the Lest We Forget project was started. And secondly, for Road 2, I would prefer to see Graham after Margaret Graham, who was the first of only 7 women so far on council. And if it's going to be Whitcomb, then Williston was objected to by emergency services. Not exactly sure that I agree with it. It's not, if it was close in pronunciation, and maybe that's something we should incorporate, that before they go on the list, EMS comments on it. But those are my thoughts for right now. I'm interested to see what the rest of my colleagues think. Can't hear you, Madam Chair.
Can't hear me? Oh, Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I want to reiterate my concern for the current street naming policy as it exists to date. Appendix A's got these brief descriptions for specific people that have been chosen in the past. And then we've got this long Citizens of the Year list. If you look at the Citizens of the Year list for Ashwell, all we have is Citizen of the Year recipient for 1976. But with some Googling and to read the obituary of Dr. Thomas O. Ashwell, he was a really significant contributing force to our community, a past mayor, a Rotarian, member of the United Church, member of numerous boards and committees, really involved in the community back in his day. So I just, something like that I would rather see on a street name than just kind of this arbitrary selection process. So I'm interested in Councillor Alfred's suggestions too, but I don't see this policy working, and I think we need to take another look at it. But at the very least tonight, we can pick from the 3 or the 6, the 2 best names out of the 6 that have been proposed.
So Councillor McGuire, your choice would be Ashwell and Williston, or Ashwell and Graham?
Whether, I know previous councils have committed to naming a street Graham. So I'd be okay with going along with that, or going with Williston. I think there's too few streets in our town named after women, but definitely in the first one, my preference would be Ashwell.
Other thoughts? Sorry, Councillor Dwyer, go ahead now.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think I saw Councillor McKenna's hand up as well. Oh, and there's Sean too, just in case you can't see them. I am okay with any of them so long as they're coming off the list. I can appreciate, and I'll reiterate, that Graham has long been lauded as the next street to be named. So I would give concurrence to that one. My preference would be to pick a veteran's name, particularly in honoring those during World War One, and then doing some sort of commemorative recognition to acknowledge that all of the street names within the subdivision are named after veterans. I wonder if that's maybe a little too late if we already have Staples and Ferreira and then Graham. So perhaps that's not worth looking into. But I'm supportive of Graham, and whatever the will of council is for the second, I would be supportive of it.
Mayor Panko?
Oh, sorry, Lorraine, didn't hear you. Yeah, I love the conversation so far, and I think we're probably heading in a bit of a different direction here. And I'm just wondering, as to the policy, all we have here are surnames. And I think for complete recognition, I think that I would like to see us consider the possibility of including a first name as well. It would add more meaning to it, and I know it would lengthen the name, but I know many other places there are two name street names, and I don't know if that's part of the policy, so would it require an amendment to the policy that was included, but Thomas Ashwell or Isabel Graham as being prominent, it would be much more meaningful if it was categorized with their first name, identified with the first name.
Other thoughts? Councillor McKenna, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm would support naming the street after Margaret Graham. That's Road 2. And on the first one, I think it's not the Curry name at this point. I think it's either Ashwell or Whitcomb. I'm fine with either one of those. Not very helpful, I guess.
Councillor Brennan, I'm sorry you're not hearing me.
Yeah, you're a little muffled. I heard you. It's not really objective, it's pretty subjective. And all 6 of these names are worthy. And so on run number 1, the developer had suggested Curry, and I'm fine with that. Road number 2, I mean, if it was up to me, I would take Graham. So that's my 2 cents. I don't, you can make arguments for each and every one of them, and I hope we don't, spend too much time on this, because it's, as I say, it's subjective stuff, and they're new streets, and that's the important part.
Councillor Allen, I don't think that we could hear you. I don't know if you could maybe move closer to the microphone, maybe.
Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So it sounds like there's a consensus for Margaret Graham for Road 2, and if there's no issues with first name being added, that's what I'm hearing anyway. As for Road 1, Ashwell or Whitcomb, I think I'd be comfortable with either. Does anybody have a strong preference?
Well, Dr. Ashwell was just one person really was passionate about having that name. And I guess I'm going to let Senior Planner Grenke speak. Just go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I opened up the policy, and it states that only a person's last name should be used as a street name unless additional identification is necessary to provide clarification or prevent duplication of an existing street name in Smith Falls and surrounding municipalities, or to honor a specific individual. So that gives a little bit of wiggle room, perhaps, if we're trying to identify a specific individual from a larger family.
Thank you for that, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if we have to make an exception for Road 2 to make it Margaret Graham, because when I read the description of why Graham was chosen, it lists off some businessmen. I'm sure they were quite prominent in their day. And a former clerk of the town in a paid position. And then the last one noted is Mrs. Graham, counselor. So I think if there's to be an exception, I would rather see Margaret Graham fully written out.
Two names. What you're saying? Okay. Mayor Panko.
She doesn't have a first name in the description, so it'd be nice to give her one on a town sign.
Yeah, I'm fine with Whitcomb Boulevard. I think it's suggested first, and I would like to see Margaret Graham Terrace. I mean, Graham is a prominent and respected name throughout the community, but I think in this situation, considering the reason behind it and her role as the first woman on council, I think it's very meaningful. And I apologize, I think I called her Isabel before, so but I'll certainly support Margaret Graham Terrace.
Mayor Panko, it was Williston and Curry. I have just yourself and one other person, Whitcomb, and then I have now Ashwell as well. I think we have equal for Ashwell and Whitcomb. Does anyone have a strong feeling about that? I know that it seems to me that the majority of us want Margaret Graham Terrace for Road 2, but Road 1, several of you said it didn't matter that much to you. Go ahead, Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I think building on what Councillor Dwyer said earlier, Whitcomb, Mr. Whitcomb contributed mightily in other areas, but he was also a World War I vet and part of the Lest We Forget project. So I would go with Councillor Dwyer and for Whitcomb for the first one.
Okay, can I get a consensus thumbs up if Whitcomb, and we're going to have Margaret Graham for the second one. Thumbs up. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. All right. You have your direction, Senior Planner Grenke.
I do.
Councillor McGuire, did you want to make a comment before we leave?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just before we move on, I'd like to note that as the list stands currently and the current policy is written, there's no Indigenous names, there's no racialized names on this list. And I don't think that's reflective of the community that built this town. So I would really like to see this policy get looked at and reviewed, but I'm not hearing a lot of consensus for that around the table.
Yeah, Councillor Alford, go ahead.
No, I thoroughly agree with, now that the two names have been decided, I thoroughly agree with Councillor McGuire that there's not enough description on the citizen of the years, and there are no Indigenous names. There is some work to be done in this policy, and I think with as much building as we are having, we're going to see a wealth of new streets in the coming years. So I think this, if we could direct staff to bring us back a policy that reflects all the comments that people have made here tonight, I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you. I agree. So we're going, the choices were given to Senior Planner Grenke, but also we're asking you, Senior Planner Grenke, to look at this policy again and take in consideration of the comments that were made this evening. I like the idea of adding names, Indigenous names especially. Thank you for Councillor McGuire bringing that up. Any other comments before we leave this? Okay. Priority issue 8.3 is a CIP application for funding 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North report. And it's with Senior Planner Grenke. It's your night tonight. Go ahead.
Thank you. My second report this evening, or the planning service's second report this evening, is on a CIP application 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North, and that is the proposed relocation of Sweet Scoops from its current location to a little bit to the north. So the application requests municipal funding under Program 3 in the amount of $1,923.75 as a building permit rebate. In this case, they are proposing to undertake extensive renovations to the interior of the site to bring it up to par for its intended purpose. Ordinarily would be eligible for a for funding under Program 2. However, there isn't sufficient funds in the reserve to accommodate a Program 2 application with the minimum of that has a minimum $10,000 under the lower approval stream. So in this case, we have an application for under Program 3. It was supported by the CIP Evaluation Committee, and staff are bringing forward the CIP Committee's recommendation in favor of supporting this the CIP application. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Comments from my colleagues. Councillor McGuire, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think this is a great application. It's going to be a corner that needs revitalization, and it's going to get it. So that's great. Since now we're getting into this threshold where the funds left in the account are so low that they're not helpful for certain programs, I'm wondering if we can push that into a reserve or put that back into the general coffers, and then we can look at funding this program again once the review comes back.
Councillor, sorry, Senior Planner Grinke, is that possible?
I'll let either CAO Morris or Treasurer Kazil speak to that. I saw a different hand go up.
Treasurer Kazil, go ahead.
Yes, so those funds are in a reserve, so they would just remain there if that was the direction by council.
So Councillor McGuire, is it your opinion that we should just leave it there until we add to it?
I guess if I don't know what it could be used for, so if it could help another account, great, but if not, I don't know if I've got a great connection because I'm having trouble hearing people tonight.
It seems like it's earmarked for that already. That's what I'm understanding from Treasurer Kazil. Any other thoughts, or Mayor Panko?
Yes, through you to Carl. Did the applicant seek or make an application under Program 2 as well?
So I would need to verify that with the planning clerk. However, unfortunately, given the funds of where we're at, it would not be eligible. But
okay. So my thought here simply is, I mean, this is under. We made a decision last fall to review it and complete the update. And at the same time, we do have an application here for for an improvement which is coming. So I have to assume that there probably is a facade improvements which are happening as well. And if it's simply no identification of available funds within the budget, but funds in reserve for this purpose, then I guess is there an appetite to potentially take funds from reserves to this budget line in order to potentially facilitate applications, or is there an interest in waiting until we have fully completed the redraft of the CIP before considering any further applications?
Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think what Councillor McGuire was trying to suggest was that we kind of stale date the funds that are in the reserve and set them aside and agree not to use them until we get the review. I get what Mayor Pankow is saying, and I think that it's fair and kosher to use up those reserve funds as they exist today for any new application, but I would not be in agreement to allocate new funds to that reserve line. I think we debated that as part of the budget. And even prior to that, when we were discussing the re-examination of this policy, and I think we all agreed that this needed to kind of stall until we had an updated policy. So I'm not in agreement to add new funds. I have no problem with the current application. Good for them. It's nice to see Sweet Scoops moving to a larger location. But I don't think that we should expend any more money on this CIP program until we get a new policy.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, Councillor Dwyer just said what I was thinking. And I certainly support this. And going forward, I think we've all agreed already that the program needs to have an update. And at that time, we're going to, but to start moving money around before we know what the parameters are going to be, I think would be folly. So I agree with Councillor Dwyer.
Go ahead, Councillor Alford, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure I understand. I am supportive of the application for Program 3. We have reserve funds. And what is the reserve?
I thought the reserve, from my understanding, was the balance. Is that true, Janet?
Yes, there's a balance of about $1,400 that's in the community improvement reserve earmarked for these monies specifically.
And
Okay.
so it's been suggested by Councillor Dwyer that we leave that money there until we have this policy updated and we get it the way we want it to be.
Well, I suspect that anything received for Program 2 would be much more than $1,400.
Oh, it would.
But
It would, for sure.
But I do agree that, and hopefully they haven't even made that application, and I'm not sure what the timeline is for the review of the CIP, but I certainly hope it can be done in a timely fashion so that we could assist some of these renovations that are this one and potentially others. In the meantime, I really think we need to pause this to get it right. So I'm not in favor of proceeding any further until the review is done. We want to get this right this time so that we don't have to go through some of the painful growing pains we've experienced in the last 3 years over this program.
But you're in agreement that about this application.
Oh, yes. No, I'm very supportive of this application.
I get the consensus that people are in agreement to just give this last one and then look at that policy and come back at a later point. Okay, thank you. I just want to add that it's heartwarming that this CIP given to this group, to the Krotkes, because that's going to change the downtown so beautifully. And that building already with Willow there is going to be such an added plus to our downtown. It will look lovely. I wish them the best on that. So thank you for that. Moving on, priority issue 8.4 is cash in lieu of parking agreement, and that's with the 7 Maple Avenue site. And again, it's with Senior Planner Grenke.
Thank you. So council will recall that that we have a proposal at the corner of Maple and William for a mixed-use development, a four-story construction with 2 commercial units on the ground floor and 33 residential units on the upper level. And when the planning process was initiated, the proposal was to accommodate all of the required parking for the entire development within the existing as required by zoning. So that would be about 50 parking spaces on site, both in a garage and outside. So when the former medical building that previously had occupied this site was removed, there was the developers decided they wanted to make use of one of the basement areas that was part of that previous complex and attach that to the existing to one of the existing commercial units, which would increase its overall floor space. And that would require, according to the calculations that were provided and reviewed, include a requirement for about 2 additional parking spaces. So the zoning bylaw allows us to proceed with the cash in lieu of required parking spaces for non-residential uses in the downtown core. And so the applicants have made that application. That's which is a separate process. It's different than a minor variance application. But in this case, if council agrees, then the cash in lieu of parking at a rate of $750 per parking space would be conveyed into into a parking reserve for future parking related improvements downtown. So in this case, staff had reviewed the application with the Public Works Department and Clerk's Office, both of whom have operational jurisdiction over on and off street parking resources, and also determined that based on the 2018 parking utilization study, there was a surplus of parking, or at least the on-street parking spaces in the vicinity of the site typically were not used close to capacity. So it's the staff opinion that the additional 2 parking spaces are not going to is not going to create an operational concern if that was if this cash in lieu of parking application were approved. So that is the recommendation of staff. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no problem with directing staff to execute this agreement. I think it makes sense. And I think if Public Works doesn't have operational concerns with it, then even better. I do have to question the value of that rate. I think that rate is the same rate that we've been using for the last 10 years. And I'm not even sure you could line a parking space for $750. So as it's a one-time fee, Carl, can you advise if you are updating our fee bylaw to include new rates across the board?
So through you, Madam Chair, yes. So we, through the zoning review, we are looking at all of our parking space provisions, and certainly we want to make sure that the parking space provisions in the bylaw that have been in place for many years are still relevant today and easy to use. But then we are also the town staff are broadly undertaking a multi-department review of all of our fees, and that would include planning fees and also looking at the cash in lieu of parking rate. I agree with you, Councillor Dwyer, and every other example and every other these numbers tend to be a lot higher, and ultimately the goal of through the cash in lieu opportunity is to create, if we're going to be removing these parkings or allowing a reduction in parking spaces, ideally we would be offsetting that and creating additional parking supply elsewhere, and the cash in lieu of parking reserve is intended to contribute to that, and certainly $750 doesn't go very far to creating that. So yes, I think a look at these fees over the next little while would be warranted and is on our radar.
Councillor sorry. McKenna, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supportive of the staff recommendation. I also just wondered, are the plans detailed enough, Mr. Granke? Have they moved along enough that are there electronic charging stations, electric car charging stations in this parking lot, either above ground or below ground? And I have a follow-up to that after, if I may.
There is no plan that I'm aware of for electric vehicle charging stations in this. We are working with our zoning bylaw consultants to investigate the feasibility and desirability of including that within the zoning bylaw for future larger scale developments. But at this point in time, there isn't that requirement through our planning process.
Thank you. If I may, a follow-up. The parking reserve fund, could it be, is it currently permitted to help fund electric vehicle charging stations with that money? I guess so. If I was going to take the 1,500 and offer to this developer or any other developer to add more electric charging stations, is there a way we can incentivize the developers into considering this?
Go ahead, Senior Planner Granke.
So I would defer this question to CAO Morris.
Oh,
Yes, through the chair. So really good question. So I would turn to Treasurer Kozil to remind us of the definition of spending within the parking reserve, but I don't think it would preclude electric vehicle charging stations. I think its original intent was for infrastructure investment, building a garage or even a surface parking lot. But that definition could be expanded. Committee may recall, we are pursuing publicly available electric vehicle charging stations. We thought we had a deal, we had to abandon that deal, so we're looking elsewhere. Just today I got an announcement that zero emission funding from the federal government has been reignited, so there may be an opportunity to get some funding federally for publicly available charging stations. But we could fashion an incentive program. We don't have one presently. I would, though, caution committee that even though our on-street parking is not at capacity, our off-street is. We're fully subscribed at our lot on Market Street. So we are looking for more parking. So I would suggest the monies in reserve may be needed for future off-street parking. There's tremendous demand right now.
Go ahead, Treasurer Kozil.
So through the chair, just to let you know that the reserve balance in that account is not substantial. It's just shy of $10,000. So that, again, doesn't go very far, but I just wanted to let you know it's about $9,900.
Any other comments? Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Carl. This question is probably more for CO Morris, but we've had a lot of studies and a lot of different things coming through the pipes on parking. We know that the parking requirements can be an impediment to affordable housing. We know that we've got adequate on-street parking in the downtown core, but we also know we have inadequate off-street parking. So I'm wondering, are there any policy changes coming down the pipes with all this information we have to create solutions? And I just want to note that every time we have the cash in lieu, the last time I think it came up was when we were talking about the patios, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me then. And I think this adding 500 square meters of commercial space, there's close to 600 square meters of commercial space is a huge win for the town. And it's going to give us a great return on investment with commercial taxes. So to add this hurdle and charge an extra $1,500, even though it's a small amount, I just don't understand why we spend the resources or invest the resources to have this policy.
Morris, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I think we're all agreed the 750 is inadequate. So we'll be bringing forward a recommendation to adjust that figure. Committee will recall the parking study we had commissioned identified it as being low and it needs to be adjusted. So we're working on that now. But I think, even though it's only $10,000 in the reserve, we do need to find a solution for off-street parking, and certainly the zoning bylaw review will offer a few policy recommendations to encourage more capacity for people to live downtown. But we do need to look at our parking minimums and adjust them. 1.25 for a residential unit is arguably too high. So that's going to be reviewed through the zoning bylaw. So I think we've got this confluence of both planning policy and parking policy coming together at the right time. Unfortunately, we've missed it for this application or this request for parking in lieu, but my projection is it'll be in place for the next one.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, just in the context of what was before us, I support staff's recommendation, and a further discussion, I guess, is warranted at a later date, but what's before us now, I support.
Seeing no other comments, I have the sense that we're supporting this one, but that we would like policy changes brought forward. We're looking at more off-street parking, but I agree with, just to add, I agree with what Councillor McGuire said about this bringing This is a great location for this, and it's been a long time waiting for it to happen. That whole area has sat vacant for quite a long while. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that refurbished, and it's exciting to just see how beautiful that building is going to be. So, okay, and that will be coming forward this evening as well. Priority issue 8.5 is Wood Avenue Phase 2B Subdivision Agreement, Campbell's Trucking. And again, it's with Senior Planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, I'm very pleased to bring forward a subdivision agreement for the first phase of what's been approved as the Maple Ridge subdivision out at the end of Wood Avenue. And in this case, for this involves 9 lots. That forms an extension of the Wood Avenue that's currently being extended just to the south end of the town. So that was these 9 lots are being built through a project, the same project as that's servicing the roughly 17 lots that were approved through a previous plan of subdivision, and all linked with the ongoing reconstruction on the existing Wood Avenue. In this case, the overall plan, when all is said and done, is for 120 single-family home lots at this through the subdivision approval, and the developer is currently working on subsequent phases. But at this point, we have reached an agreement on, and the applicant and the developer is very close to finalizing all of the conditions for the 9 lots. He's hoping to get construction started very shortly. The subdivision agreement implements most of the draft approval conditions, and contains a number of other provisions in there which have been reviewed and approved by the town solicitor as well as the developer, just governing the overall build out of the site. And certainly I appreciate the work that the developer, the Public Works Department, and everyone has put into this project. And I'm pleased to recommend that the council passes a bylaw authorizing the execution of the subdivision agreement. Thank you.
Thumbs up. I'm seeing thumbs up. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to these homes being built, because we have a lot of other kinds of options. It's nice that we now are going to have a subdivision of 120 single family homes. It'll be a great contribution to all of our town assets. So I'm looking forward to seeing this. Okay, so all 5 of these priority issues will be coming forward in our next meeting, and it's going to be following this one. And I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Brennan, seconded by, oh, sorry, Clerk Bennett, did you want something before we leave this? I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, you had just noted that all 5 were coming forward, but there's only 4 items coming forward. The 1 item doesn't need direction at this point in time. And that's sorry, Carl. There was 1 item that Carl did not need at this point in time. So the only items that we have coming forward is the RCAF bylaw, the cash in lieu of parking agreement bylaw, and we have the community improvement funding program bylaw, and those will be the only items coming forward.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you. Deputy Clerk Bennett is correct with respect to the street naming. We just required council's direction on that. A resolution will come forward following the notification and agency review.
Very much. Right. So I need a motion now to adjourn. With I think Councillor Brennan put that forward. Someone second that motion, please. Councillor Alford, all in favor? The recommended motion is that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 5:45 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. Thank you.
We could just take a 5-second break here.
5 minutes?
If that's what the mayor would like, yes, just so we can pass out these motions.
Mayor Panko, how long would you like?
A few minutes is fine for me, as long as we got the everything in order here. I'll just go through it. Jay, you have the option of minutes, seconded by, oh, Jay's gone. Okay.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
Oh, sorry, your seconder for minutes?
That will be Nikki.
Okay. And 7-1 is moved by Nikki, seconded by Nikki, your seconder?
Sorry,
Hey.
what are we talking about? Jay's
Yeah.
gonna do it. Thanks,
Okay.
Jay.
Okay.
And then bylaw 7.2, if Councillor McKenna could do that one.
Peter, your seconder?
I'll second that, Peter.
Councillor Brennan,
Okay.
And then the cash in lieu of parking, if Councillor Alfred could do that one.
And Wendy, your seconder, sorry?
Lorraine, you okay with that? A second. Lorraine, we can't hear you.
He says sure. 7.4.
7.4, if Councillor Alfred would do that one.
7.4.
That's the CIP.
And Wendy, your seconder?
Peter?
sure.
Okay.
And 7.5 is the Campbell's Trucking. Councillor McGuire, would you do that one?
Can I
You want
second
a
that one?
Sure.
And then we have miscellaneous motion is already with Councillor McKenna.
Peter, your
Okay.
seconder?
Councillor Alfred agreed to second that.
Okay. Adjournment. Who supports Wendy's motion for adjournment?
Chris, you okay to second that?
Everybody say no to adjournment. Okay,
So
reports. Anybody hand up if you got some? No? Okay, I'll have a few, but I'll try to keep it brief.
okay, Mayor Pinko, if you are ready, whenever you're ready, just let me know and we'll.
Yeah, a second here.
Do you want to put your chain of office on, Mayor Panko?
Thank you, Peter. I'd always
All
forget
right.
it wasn't for somebody here. Okay, might as well get me back in. All right, there, please.
Okay, we will go live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everyone, to this regular meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Monday, February 7th. I will open our meeting with our land acknowledgement. On February 7th, we acknowledge that the sacred land in which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin, the Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawn on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. I also have one proclamation today. It's one, of course, that hits home to probably most families. It's Wear Red Canada Day. Whereas for February 13th, 2022. Whereas heart disease is the #1 killer of women worldwide and the leading cause of premature death for Canadian women, a fact unknown to many women and their healthcare providers. Whereas the Canadian Women's Heart Health Alliance is an organization of volunteer health professionals and patients working hard to improve women's heart health. And whereas Wear Red Canada Day is celebrated annually to raise awareness for all Canadians, but especially Canadian women, to be mindful, curious, and proactive in the management of their heart, health, and wellness. Whereas we want to see better prevention, diagnosis, and care, and fewer women die prematurely from heart disease. Therefore, I, Sean Pankow, Mayor of the Town of Smith Falls, do hereby proclaim February 13th, 2022 is Wear Red Canada Day in the Town of Smith Falls. Also, I want to take a moment to speak about our crossing guards, and who we are, of course, extremely grateful for the job they do in keeping the children of our community safe. And I have a document ready here, which seems to be spinning and not coming up. I can speak specifically to the names of our crossing guards. So we have 6 crossing guard locations in town. Brockville and Ross, I think everybody knows Gary Lackey. And Gary's the crossing guard with the big wave. Every time you pass a big wave and big smile. McGill and Chambers, we have Mary Lynn Durant. At Queen and Anderson, we have Angela Gura. At Broadview and Bravo, we have 2. It's a busy intersection. That's Marcia Saunders and Leanne O'Neill. And at Ross and Percy, we have Donald Corrigal. In addition, we have a group of backup crossing guards that cover locations when required. Our guards are dedicated to attend the location daily, even when the buses are canceled, but the schools remain open. They have big hearts and care not only about the children's safety, but our community safety. And of course, as we move through this winter, we know we've had some extreme cold, some real heavy snow. And regardless, our crossing guards are out there to make sure our children make it to and from school and home safely. And I want to take a moment to recognize Leanne O'Neill. Again, she's one of the crossing guards at Brockville and Broadview. And Leanne has been a crossing guard of the town for almost 22 years. And for many children, for many years, she was located at the Russell Street and Elmsley Street crossing. Old St. Francis was the location there, ensuring children were crossed safely to the former school. Most recently, she moved to the Brockville Street, Broadview Avenue crossing, and has been dedicated to ensure the safety of her children from both St. Francis and Chimo schools. Now, she's recently moved and accepted a job at the town of Perth, and we wish Leanne every success. Thank her for all her years of loyalty and service to the town. If you pass through the intersection this week, make sure you give Leanne a honk or a wave or both. Thank her for her dedication. Her last day will be this Friday, and Leanne, on behalf of council and the town, we thank you very much for all you've done over 22 years to keep our community and our children safe. Moving on with our agenda, last for disclosure of monetary interest. And I see none. We have adoption, no delegations, but we do have adoption of minutes. That's with Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that the minutes of the January 17th, 2022 and the January 24th, 2022 council meetings be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that the minutes of the January 17th, 2022 and January 24th, 2022 council meetings be approved as circulated. All in favor? That's carried. Reports. Any reports this evening? Okay, I've got just a few myself. I think all of council, most of council was there on January 26th when I chaired the Development Charges Background Study public meeting. We had a great presentation from Hempson, and good participation from some members of our public. So I think it was a very productive meeting, and we look forward to that coming forward in the not so distant future. On the 27th, I attended the regular meeting of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. Peter Leanhoots was reconfirmed as chair, and Perth Councillor Judy Brown will remain as vice chair. We had a great discussion and support for the Conservation Authority to move ahead with a watershed plan for the entire Rideau watershed. And it's the first one since 1968. And even though regular watershed plans and report cards that have been completed at the sub-watershed or catchment level, there has not been an up-to-date plan for the entire watershed since 1968. And of course, in our day of climate change, I think it's going to be a very beneficial plan to show us how the world has changed since 68 and how we need to prepare for change coming in the future. Also on February 2nd, I chair the Racism and Discrimination Task Force meeting. Just to bring committee up to date, we had the completion of the interim report, and they'll be coming to committee of the whole later this month. We also had a great presentation from Erin Lee of Minor County Interval House talking about the great work, of course, that Interval House does for our community. And later that day on the 2nd, the Housing Advisory Committee met again. We had a great presentation from Alison Tutak, who's the Director of Community Social Services for Leeds Grenville, regarding incentives for secondary housing units. We also had a discussion on the program that Carleton Place has started. And there's a pretty broad discussion on this topic, and there will form part of recommendations coming back to committee of the whole for discussion in the future. And that's it for my reports. We have a number of bylaws this evening, and we're going to start with Councillor Dwyer, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pinko. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brennan that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meetings on the 17th and 24th days of January 2022 be received and read a first time and taken and read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meetings held on the 17th and 24th days of January 2022 be received, read a first time, and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Dwyer.
Excuse me. This is a regular occurrence for us. Every month, Nadine compiles all of our minutes from previous meetings and brings it forward so that we can formally adopt them and put them in the record.
Great, thank you. Third reading, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meetings on the 17th and 24th days of January 2022 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10304-2022.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meetings on the 17th and 24th days of January 2022 be now read a third time. It's only passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10304-2022. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor McKenna, I believe you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. But moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alford, that a bylaw to exempt the Royal Canadian Air Force Association 443. Sorry, that should have been Councillor Brennan seconded that, if I'm not mistaken. So that a bylaw to exempt the Royal Canadian Air Force Association 443 Rideau Wing from taxation at 44 Abbott Street North be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that a bylaw to exempt the Royal Canadian Air Force Association 443 Rideau Wing from taxation at 44 Abbott Street North be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Discussion, Councillor McKenna?
Yes, legislation permits municipalities or even directs municipalities to waive property taxation for association or clubs that have former members of the Canadian Armed Forces in it. And the Royal Canadian Air Force Association certainly fits that mandate. So this is will be put in place for the next 10 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you. Any further discussion? We have a third reading, please.
Again, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that a bylaw to exempt the Royal Canadian Air Force Association 443 Rideau Wing from taxation at 44 Abbott Street North be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, and sealed, and numbered 10305-2022.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, seconded by Councillor Brennan. The bylaw to exempt the Royal Canadian Air Force Association 443 Rideau Wing from taxation at 44 Abbott Street North be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10305-2022. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Alford, you're up next.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Allen, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a cash in lieu of parking agreement with Hammer and Nails Developments Limited respecting the property known as 7 Maple Avenue be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alfred, second by Councillor Allen, that bylaw to authorize execution of a cash in lieu of parking agreement with Hammer and Nails Development Limited, respecting the property known as 7 Maple Avenue, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Alfred?
Yes, Your Worship. The site plan had to change a little bit to by the developer to hang on to some additional commercial floor space. And in doing so, it means that the requirement for 52 parking spots, now they can only provide 50 parking spots on site. So this cash in lieu pays the town $750 per space, and exempts and then allows them to go ahead with the 50 parking spots. There was the parking study is quite clear that there is enough capacity in that general area. And again, living downtown, not everyone will afford themselves 2 cars. So that is what comes before us tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any further discussion? May I have a third reading, please?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Allen, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a cash in lieu of parking agreement with Hammer and Nails Developments Limited, respecting the property known as 7 Maple Avenue, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10306-2022.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alfred, second by Councillor Allen, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a cash in lieu of parking agreement with Hammer and Nails Developments Limited, respecting the property known as 7 Maple Avenue, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10306-2022. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Alfred, you have 7.4 as well.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Patricia Krotke, respecting the property known as 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alfred, seconded by Councillor McKenna, the bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Patricia Krotke, respecting the property known as 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North, be received and read a first time, taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Alfred?
Very much like the previous bylaw, this is also a very welcome development in our downtown. This would see Pickled Pig / Sweet Scoops move up to Beckwith Street. And in doing so, the CIP was applied for under Program 3 to refund or rebate or forgive some of the planning and building permit fees. And so that is the calculation that planning staff have done for us, and this would result in a funding agreement for $1,923.75 and for planning fees and building permit under this CIP Program 3.
Thank you. Any further discussion? May I have a third reading, please?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Patricia Krotke, respecting the property known as 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10307-2022.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alfred, second by Councillor McKenna, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Patricia Krotke, respecting the property known as 30 to 48 Beckwith Street North, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10307-2022. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And Councillor McGuire, you have the next and final bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by, who had that one, Councillor Dwyer?
Yes.
Thanks. That a bylaw to authorize execution of a subdivision agreement with 734230 Ontario Limited, Campbell's Trucking, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McGuire, seconded by Councillor Dwyer, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a subdivision agreement with 734230 Ontario Limited, Campbell's Trucking, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Discussion, Councilor McGuire?
So this is the second of three phases of the second phase of the subdivision. And the reason why we're splitting it up like this is so that they can move ahead with construction while getting approvals for the latter parts. The subdivision plan involves the utilities, landscaping, road, drainage, etc. And they can get to work on that. So it's going to be really exciting because it's the first development of single family homes I think we've had in a while. So very exciting addition to that end of town.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Can I have a third reading, please?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dwyer that a bylaw to authorize a subdivision agreement with 734230 Ontario Limited, Campbell's Trucking be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10308-2022.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McGuire, second by Councillor Dwyer, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a subdivision agreement with 734230 Ontario Limited, Campbell's Trucking be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10308-2022. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. That's it for our bylaws. We have one motion tonight, which is with Councillor McKenna. Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alford, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls direct staff to review and update the current property standards bylaw, and further that the bylaw include provisions for naturalization of properties, lawns, and gardens.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor McKenna.
Yes, this has been on our radar for several months now. The bylaw that, property standards bylaw that we're currently using, council and the community feel is quite outdated and doesn't reflect current thinking around mitigation of climate change and other aspects of property standards. So council was very supportive of seeing an updated version and has asked staff to bring that back at the earliest convenience. The entire bylaw is quite lengthy. Council is particularly interested in the naturalization of properties aspect. However, this suggests that we want to look at the whole bylaw, but I know council is anxious to look at that particular piece sooner rather than later. So I know staff with input from the community will develop that and bring a draft back in the relatively near future.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I see none. So it is moved by Councillor McKenna, seconded by Councillor Alford. The Council of the Corporation of Town of Smith Falls directs staff to review and update the current property standards bylaw, and further the bylaw include provision for naturalization of properties, lawns, and gardens. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Any inquiries or announcements? Councillor McGuire.
Got a trivia if we want to get back into it tonight.
Sure.
In the 1890s, how many powerhouses were located in Smith Falls?
Define
One.
powerhouses.
Three.
Three. There was three. Most of them, they were all located in old grist mills. And the cool thing is that I didn't realize we used to have mills all the way down the waterfront. So it really created a interaction with the water, the same as you'd see in Almont or some of the other towns that still have them. But we're lucky enough to still have the Rideau Canal Complex and our water treatment plants. So, which are really great examples of the kind of architecture that used to go up and down our waterfront.
Well done, Councillor McGuire. I'm going to volunteer for our next trivia, the next council meeting. Councillor Brandon has got his hand up. So.
Yeah, I'm going to use an outside consultant for my next trivia question, so be prepared.
Okay, we'll think deeply. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Alford, you have the motion for adjournment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that this council adjourn its proceedings at 6:09 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. I do believe, Your Worship, that might be a record for having both committee of the whole and council.
At least in recent times anyway, you're right. Thank you. Okay, moved by Councillor Alfred, second by Councillor McGuire. This council adjourns proceedings at 6:09 PM and stands to adjourn to the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Great job. Oh, great job.
I don't know why I wasn't being heard because I had my speaker. Can you hear me now? Normally?
It's